My name is Dmitry Kovalenko. I'm 32 years old, and until I became a participant in the experiment, my life was predictably dull. I worked as a programmer in a small IT company, rented a one-bedroom apartment on the city's outskirts, and followed the same routine day after day. Wake up at 7, grab coffee from a machine, ride a crowded bus to work, spend 8 hours in front of a monitor, come home, eat frozen dinners, and fall asleep to the drone of the TV. Weekends were spent at home, with occasional meetups with the few friends I had, who were increasingly busy with their own families and less likely to join me for a beer. The last few months had been particularly tough. The company was struggling, salaries were delayed, and management hinted at layoffs. I still hadn't paid off my car loan, and rent kept creeping up. Sleep was elusive. I often woke in the middle of the night, plagued by anxious thoughts about the future. The doctor at the clinic prescribed sleeping pills, but they barely helped and left me groggy in the mornings. I felt trapped in a vicious cycle with no way out. Everything changed the day I was browsing job listings online. Among the usual programmer gigs, I stumbled across an unusual ad. A medical center was recruiting volunteers to test a new drug. The compensation was generous, enough to cover my car loan. The requirements were straightforward: age 25 to 40, no serious health conditions, and willingness to stay under medical supervision for a month. The drug was designed to treat insomnia, promising not only deep sleep but also vivid, memorable dreams. At first, I was skeptical. Human experiments sounded like something out of science fiction, not real life. But I was desperate for money, so I decided to learn more. The medical center was in a new part of town, housed in a sleek glass and concrete building. The interior was pristine white, adorned with diplomas and certificates, and the staff exuded professionalism and warmth. Dr. Grigoriev, the study's lead, was a man in his 50s with sharp eyes behind thin-framed glasses. He explained the drug, called Oneiron, in detail. It was a new generation of sleep aids based on synthetic melatonin analogs. Unlike standard sleeping pills, Oneiron induced highly vivid, controlled dreams that patients could recall in intricate detail. He said the study was in its final phase, and they needed volunteers to confirm the drug's safety. Side effects were minimal, he claimed: slight daytime drowsiness and occasional disorientation upon waking. Nothing serious. I'd take the drug for 4 weeks, keep a detailed dream journal, and undergo weekly medical checkups. The terms seemed reasonable. I signed the contract, passed a full medical exam, and received my first batch of pills. They were small, blue, packaged in dated blister packs. Along with them came a leather-bound journal for recording dream details, sleep and wake times, dream vividness, emotional tone, and any unusual elements. I took the first pill at home on a Saturday evening, starting the experiment on a weekend to monitor my body's reaction. I fell asleep quickly, unusual given my insomnia. I woke 8 hours later, feeling deeply rested, a sensation I hadn't experienced in months. But the real surprise came when I recalled my dream. Normally, I barely remembered my dreams, just fleeting images or fragments. That night, the dream was so vivid it felt like a memory of a real day. I was wandering through an unfamiliar city, strolling along cobblestone streets, visiting an antique shop where I browsed old books. I could recall smells: coffee from a corner cafe, the musty scent of old paper, fresh air after rain. I wrote it all down in the journal, feeling a spark of excitement. If the drug could deliver such vivid dreams every night, the next month promised to be fascinating. I imagined traveling to incredible places in my sleep, meeting intriguing people, and living adventures I'd never dare attempt in real life. The second night's dream was even more remarkable. I was a successful businessman, running a large company, living in a luxurious oceanfront house. The dream was so realistic that, upon waking, I was disoriented for minutes, my modest apartment feeling alien after the opulent interiors of my dream. Even the taste of my morning coffee seemed wrong, as if I'd grown accustomed to a different brew. By the end of the first week, I'd settled into a new routine. I took a pill an hour before bed, diligently recorded my dreams, and marveled at how well rested I felt during the day. The dreams grew more vivid and memorable. I explored space, dove into underwater cities, performed on stage before thousands, and fought dragons in medieval castles. Each night brought a new adventure, and I eagerly anticipated the next pill. At work, colleagues noticed I was more energetic and focused. Proper sleep worked wonders. I accomplished more, felt more confident, and even considered looking for a better job. Financial worries seemed less daunting, knowing I'd earn a tidy sum from the experiment. The only concern was that some dream details felt too real. Upon waking, I could still smell the sea breeze from a dream about a tropical island or taste exotic fruits I'd eaten in my sleep. A few times I confused dream memories with real events. But Dr. Grigoriev assured me this was normal. The drug simply made my brain process sleep information more intensely. The second week of the experiment brought a noticeable shift in my dreams. Where they'd once been fantastical and vibrant, they now felt more grounded, yet no less vivid. I often saw myself in mundane scenarios, working in a different, more prestigious office, living in a larger, nicer apartment, interacting with people I'd never met in real life, but who felt like close acquaintances in my dreams. One recurring figure was a woman named Anna, a brunette with green eyes who worked as a designer. In my dreams, we'd been a couple for years. Our relationship was complex. We argued often, reconciled, planned a future together, but something always went wrong. The dreams were so detailed I remembered not just her appearance, but her habits, her way of speaking, her favorite foods, even the way she wrinkled her nose when annoyed. Waking from these dreams, I felt an odd emptiness, as if I'd lost someone important, as if Anna were out there missing me. But I couldn't find her. I even searched social media for someone resembling her, to no avail. Logically, I knew she was a product of my drug-enhanced imagination, but emotionally, it was hard to accept. By the end of the second week, my dreams took a darker turn. I still lived in that alternate life, but now it was plagued by grim events. Arguments with Anna grew harsher. I shouted cruel things and she left in tears. At work, I clashed with bosses, and colleagues turned against me. My once cozy dream home now felt cold and oppressive. Strangest of all, I began acting in ways completely unlike myself. I lied, cheated, betrayed people's trust. In one particularly unsettling dream, I stole money from a friend who'd asked for help in a crisis. Waking up, I was shaken by guilt so intense it felt like I'd actually done it. Writing in my journal, I noticed my handwriting had changed. Normally sloppy, it was now neat and precise. Sometimes I wrote words I hadn't intended, as if my hand moved on its own. I even found entries I didn't remember making, written in my handwriting but describing dream details I thought I'd forgotten. At my next appointment, I shared these observations with Dr. Grigoriev. He listened attentively, made notes in my file, and reassured me everything was on track. He explained that the drug could affect handwriting and memory due to heightened brain activity during sleep. The shift in dream tone was also expected, as my brain adapted to the drug, generating more complex, realistic scenarios. He advised me not to fixate on the dream's content and to treat them as an interesting but inconsequential experience. He also increased my dosage, explaining that my body was adjusting to the drug and needed a stronger dose to maintain its effects. The new pills were slightly larger and a deeper blue. The third week began with a disturbing new development. I started waking up with bruises. First, a small abrasion on my elbow, which I chalked up to bumping into something in my sleep. Then a scratch on my cheek, followed by a bruise on my shin. Each morning brought new marks I couldn't explain. I began sleeping in long-sleeved pajamas and placed a nightlight by my bed to check if I was injuring myself in my sleep. But the oddities didn't stop there. One morning I woke with dirty hands despite washing thoroughly before bed. There was soil under my nails and grass stains on my feet. I lived on the 4th floor with windows shut and the door locked. How could I have left the apartment and returned unnoticed? There was no logical explanation. My dreams grew darker and more vivid. In that parallel life, everything unraveled. My relationship with Anna collapsed after I cheated on her with her best friend. I was fired from my job for stealing company data. Friends turned their backs on me after I betrayed one of them. I was alone, bitter, and ready to do anything for revenge. In one chilling dream, I stalked Anna, waiting outside her home, plotting to hurt her for leaving me. I felt a twisted satisfaction imagining her fear, her pleas for mercy. Waking up, I was horrified by these thoughts. I'd never felt such malice in real life. But in the dream, those emotions felt natural, justified. Worse, the dream emotions began bleeding into reality. After a particularly dark dream, I'd wake angry, and the rage lingered for hours. At work, I snapped at colleagues, was rude to clients. My boss warned me about my behavior and even threatened to fire me if I didn't pull myself together. I tried to cope, exercising, meditating, but nothing worked. It felt like a darker, crueler version of myself was taking over. I caught myself thinking violent thoughts like smashing my neighbor's stereo with a hammer when their music was too loud, or shoving a woman on the bus who refused to give up her seat. More alarming, I started losing track of time. I'd fall asleep at night and wake up not in the morning but in the afternoon, missing hours. My clocks and phones showed the correct time, but I felt like far more time had passed. I found items in my apartment I didn't remember buying. A new toothbrush, a pack of cigarettes, though I didn't smoke, and this strange knife with a carved handle in a kitchen drawer. When I asked Dr. Grigoriev about this, he seemed slightly concerned but assured me these were temporary side effects. The drug affected brain areas tied to time perception and memory, he said, which could cause minor gaps or disorientation. Still, he lowered my dosage slightly and prescribed vitamins to support my nervous system. He also gave me a thicker journal with sections for recording not just dreams but my daily state, unusual sensations, or thoughts. By the end of the 3rd week, my lifestyle was changing against my will. I started buying foods I'd never eaten before: spicy sauces, exotic spices, premium cuts of meat. Books appeared in my apartment, crime novels, psychology manuals on manipulation, even a forensics textbook that I didn't recall purchasing. When I tried to remember when or why I bought them, my mind drew a blank. Stranger still, I began knowing things I'd never studied. I suddenly understood how to pick locks or tail someone without being noticed. These skills emerged as if I'd always had them but forgotten. My nighttime wanderings became more frequent. I'd wake not just with dirty hands and feet, but in clothes I didn't remember putting on. A jacket I didn't recall wearing, or shoes that should have been by the door. One morning I woke in jeans and a sweater, though I'd gone to bed in pajamas. In my jacket pocket, I found a bus ticket from the previous day and a receipt from a store across town. I began to suspect I was going somewhere at night without remembering it. I set up a camera in my bedroom to catch what happened, but in the morning it was unplugged, the memory card missing. Someone clearly didn't want me to know the truth about my nocturnal activities. But who? I lived alone. The door was locked, and my keys were on the nightstand. The final days of the third week were a nightmare. My dreams became unrelentingly violent. I saw myself committing horrific acts, beating people, robbing, threatening. In one particularly gruesome dream, I stood over a body in the dark, holding a bloodied knife, feeling a surge of satisfaction. Waking up with a smile, it took minutes to grasp the horror of what I'd imagined. Realizing my mental state was deteriorating, I decided to quit the experiment early. But when I called the medical center, they said Dr. Grigoriev was on vacation, and his deputy couldn't see me for a week. With only a few days left in the trial, the nurse urged me to finish the course. That night, I had the most terrifying dream yet. I was in Anna's apartment, standing over her as she slept, unaware, a knife in my hand. I was consumed by rage, blaming her for ruining my life. I raised the knife, aiming for her heart. I woke screaming, my shirt soaked in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I feared I'd pass out. But the true horror came when I looked at my hands. They were covered in blood. Not dream blood, real, sticky, crimson blood on my palms, under my nails, on my wrists. Fresh blood. I rushed to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and scrubbed frantically. The hot water turned pink as it washed away the blood, but I kept scrubbing, trying to erase not just the blood, but the terror of what was happening to me. The blood was real. I could smell its metallic tang, feel its thick coating on my fingers. But where had it come from? I checked my body in the mirror. No cuts, no bruises. The blood wasn't mine. Trembling, I searched the apartment, checking every corner, every room. No bloodstains, no signs of anything horrific. I checked the kitchen knives, all clean and dry in their drawer. I looked in the fridge. No evidence I'd been handling raw meat or anything that could bleed. The only explanation was that I'd gone somewhere at night and didn't remember. Again. But this time, the consequences were far graver than dirty hands or strange items in my pockets. This time, there was blood, and I had no idea whose it was or where it came from. The thought that I might have hurt someone without knowing it filled me with dread. I tried to piece together the previous evening. I remembered taking the pill, going to bed, falling asleep quickly. Then the nightmare about Anna and the knife. Between the dream and waking, nothing. No memory of getting up, dressing, or going anywhere. It was as if someone else had controlled my body while my conscious mind slept and dreamed horrors. I decided to stop taking the drug immediately, despite the trial's end being days away. I threw the remaining pills down the garbage chute, hoping that without them I'd return to normal. But it was too late. The process Oniron had triggered had gained unstoppable momentum. I didn't realize it yet, but the drug hadn't just affected my dreams. It had opened a door between two realities, and that door wouldn't close. During the day, I felt relatively normal, aside from constant anxiety and obsessive thoughts about the blood. I checked the news repeatedly for reports of incidents in the city, but found nothing. No murders, no assaults, no missing persons. Could the blood have been from an animal? A cut that healed quickly? I clung to any explanation to avoid the obvious. That evening, I debated whether to sleep. I was exhausted but terrified of what might happen at night. Eventually, fatigue won, and I fell asleep without a pill, hoping for normal dreams. I'd wake in my bed, clean, and sane. But the dream was as vivid and real as ever. I was back in that parallel reality, now darker and more menacing. My dream apartment was a bunker, windows boarded, the door reinforced with multiple locks. Newspapers littered the floor, my face on the front pages, headlines screaming about a wanted criminal. In the dream, I knew I was a killer. I didn't recall how many I'd killed or how, but I knew it was many. The police hunted me citywide, and I hid in this makeshift fortress planning my next crime. Fear, mixed with a perverse thrill at my power over life and death. In a corner stood a large chest, and I knew it held trophies from my crimes. Victims' jewelry, personal items, photos. I'd open it, sifting through the objects, recalling each murder in vivid detail. Their faces as they realized their fate, their final words, the smell of blood and fear. I woke not in my bed but on the kitchen floor, dressed in clothes I didn't remember putting on. Dark jeans and a black hoodie. I clutched the carved handle knife that had appeared days earlier. The blade was clean, but the handle was slick with my sweat. How long had I been here? The clock read 6 a.m., but it felt like an eternity. Getting up, I noticed my apartment keys were on the kitchen table, not the nightstand where I left them. I must have gone out again. But where? And why the knife? My thoughts were a jumble, my head pounding. I tried to recall anything from the night, but there was only a void between the dream and waking. I couldn't wait for my scheduled appointment. I needed answers, an explanation, and a way to stop this nightmare. I went to the medical center immediately, but when I arrived, they told me Dr. Grigoriev didn't exist. The administrator said no one by that name had ever worked there. I showed her the contract, the dream journal, the empty blister packs. She examined them and said the signature didn't match any of their doctors, and the forms looked forged. The center had conducted sleep studies, but they ended 6 months ago, and no new volunteers were being recruited. My world began to crumble. If Dr. Grigoriev didn't exist, who gave me the drug? Who conducted my checkups? I vividly remembered our meetings, his office, our discussions. Was it all a hallucination? But then where did the pills come from? The ones that had so profoundly altered my mind. I asked to see a list of the center's doctors. None resembled Dr. Grigoriev, and there were no male doctors of his age. The administrator suggested I see a psychiatrist, but I declined and fled the building. Outside, I tried to make sense of it. What had happened to me over the past 3 weeks? If there was no experiment, what pills had I been taking? Where did they come from? And most importantly, what was I doing at night when I lost control? Back home, I tore through my apartment for clues. In the nightstand, I found the pack of pills I thought I'd thrown out. But they weren't the blue Honorin pills. These were white, unmarked, in a plain plastic bag. Where'd they come from? I didn't remember buying them. I searched online for Onirin but found nothing. No mention in any medical database. However, I stumbled across reports of personality splitting caused by unknown psychotropic drugs. People described losing control, committing acts they didn't remember, living double lives. One article caught my eye, detailing secret experiments with mind-altering drugs. Unsuspecting people were lured into fake medical trials to create controllable personalities who could carry out orders without recollection. Was I a victim of such an experiment? But who would do this, and why? The answers lay buried in my subconscious, in the memory gaps I experienced each night. I resolved to stay awake that night to monitor my mind. I drank several cups of strong coffee, turned on every light, and sat in a chair facing the door. If my other self tried to leave, I'd notice and stop it. But around midnight, despite my efforts, I began to drift off. My eyelids grew heavy, my thoughts muddled, and the coffee stopped working. The last thing I remember was standing up and walking toward the door. Then, nothing. I came to at dawn in an unfamiliar place, standing on the edge of a high-rise rooftop, 1 foot dangling over the void. 40 meters below, the asphalt courtyard stretched out. 1 step, and I'd have plummeted to my death. What was I doing here? How did I get here? Carefully stepping back, I looked around. The rooftop was unfamiliar, the building unlike any near my home. I was still in the black hoodie and jeans from the night before. In my pocket, I found a note in my handwriting. Anna lives in apartment 47. She's home. Key under the mat. My heart raced. Anna, the woman from my dreams. But if she was imaginary, where did this note come from? Why was I on the roof of a building where she supposedly lived? Had my mind created not just dreams, but an entire alternate reality with real people? I descended from the roof and stepped onto the street. The building was a real residential block, a 1980s-era 9-story structure. The intercom listed apartment 47, registered to an A. Semenova. My dream had taken on real-world form. How was this possible? I stood outside the building, torn. I needed to know if Anna was real. But what if she was? What if my violent dreams had a basis in reality? What if I'd actually hurt someone? Curiosity overcame fear. I climbed to the 5th floor and found apartment 47. The door was standard, metal, with a peephole and 2 locks. No signs of forced entry. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. An unnerving, prolonged silence. I found a key under the mat and held it, hesitating. Using it would be crossing a line, invading someone's life. But I'd come too far to stop. I needed the truth, no matter how horrific. The key slid into the lock and turned effortlessly. The door opened silently, as if freshly oiled. I stepped into the hallway, moving quietly. The apartment matched my dreams perfectly. The same wallpaper, furniture, even the faint scent of her perfume. But the worst awaited in the bedroom. Anna lay on the bed, motionless, eyes closed. At first I thought she was sleeping, but her unnatural stillness, pale skin, and lack of breath told me otherwise. She was dead. The bruises on her neck suggested she'd been strangled. I stood over the body of a woman who existed only in my dreams but was now real. I realized I had killed her. Maybe last night, maybe earlier. My hands remembered the feel of her throat, though my mind refused to accept it. In my dreams, I'd planned her murder, and in reality, I'd carried it out. How was this possible? How could dreams become reality? Or had reality become part of my dreams? The line between the two had vanished, and I could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. In a panic, I fled the apartment, leaving the door open. I ran down the stairs out into the street and kept running until I reached home. There I locked the door, barricaded it with furniture, and sat in a corner, clutching my head. What now? Turn myself in for a murder I didn't remember? Who would believe a story about dreams turning real? It sounded like the ravings of a madman. Was I mad? Had there been no experiment, no Dr. Grigoriev, no pills? Was it all in my head? But then where did those white tablets come from? Who planted them? And most importantly, was Anna really dead? Or was that another hallucination? That evening, I watched the news, expecting a report about a body being found. But there was nothing. No murders, no mysterious deaths. As if that morning on the 5th floor never happened. Or had the body not been discovered yet? I searched online for Anna Semenova at that address but found nothing. The building existed, but apartment 47 had been vacant for months. My mind was trapped in a maze of dreams and reality. What was true? And what was fiction? Did Anna exist? Or was she a hallucination? Had I killed her? Or imagined it? If this was all my broken mind, how dangerous was I to others? The next few days were agonizing uncertainty. I didn't leave my apartment, ordered food through apps, and avoided all contact with the outside world. I obsessively checked news and crime reports, waiting for word of Anna's body. But the silence persisted. As if that horrific morning never happened, I hid the white tablets in a drawer, but they seemed to draw my gaze. I'd take them out, study them under the light, trying to understand what they were and where they came from. They were plain, unmarked, with a faint chemical smell that felt oddly familiar. Without the drug, my dreams became chaotic and terrifying. I saw myself in different parts of the city, always at night, always armed, a knife, a hammer, a rope. The victims varied, men, women, young, old, but they all died by my hand. In the dreams I reveled in their fear, savored their agony, collected their final screams. I'd wake drenched in sweat, screaming, trembling. I checked my hands, clean, searched the apartment, no signs of nighttime excursions. But the fear lingered. What if my dreams started becoming real again? What if I woke, standing over another body, with no memory of how it happened? On the 4th day of seclusion, I made a desperate decision. If I'd killed Anna, her body would have been found by now. If not, either the crime never happened, or I'd hidden the evidence too well. I needed to return to that apartment and confirm what was real. Waiting until dark, I went back to the building. The city felt different, as if it had changed in the days I'd stayed inside. Familiar streets seemed alien, buildings unfamiliar. Even the house looked different from my memory. The entrance was locked, the intercom broken. I waited until a resident left, slipping inside before the door closed. I climbed to the 5th floor, found apartment 47. The door was locked, no key under the mat. I pressed my ear to it and heard music, voices. Someone was home. But who? Anna, whom I'd supposedly killed? Or someone else? I rang the bell. An elderly woman about 70 in a bathrobe and slippers opened the door. She eyed me warily and asked what I wanted. I explained I was looking for Anna Semenova, but she shook her head, saying no, Anna lived there. She and her husband had been in the apartment for 20 years. My world collapsed again. If someone else lived here, where was Anna? Did she ever exist? Had I killed someone else or no one at all? Was it all in my mind? I apologized and left. Outside, I tried to gather my thoughts. Either I was completely insane, imagining a non-existent woman, or something stranger was happening. What if Anna wasn't real but a projection of my mind? What if my brain had learned to materialize dreams, creating temporary realities that existed only for me? The idea was so absurd I laughed, but the laughter turned to hysteria, then sobs. I stood on the street crying, realizing I'd lost all grip on reality. The line between dream and waking had vanished. Back home, I retrieved the white tablets. Maybe taking one would reveal what substance was affecting me. Perhaps its effect would be less destructive than the blue pills from the non-existent doctor. I placed a tablet on my tongue and swallowed with water. It was bitter, with a metallic aftertaste. Almost immediately I felt dizzy, then a strange relaxation, my body turning to cotton. My mind blurred at the edges, thoughts slowed, and reality grew less distinct. But I didn't fall asleep. Instead, the world around me changed. My apartment walls became transparent, revealing other rooms, other lives. Reality seemed layered, and I could see all the layers at once. In one, I sat in my shabby apartment. In another, I was wealthy and successful. In a third, I was strapped in a straitjacket in a psychiatric ward. Gradually, I grasped the horrifying truth. All my realities were equally real and equally false. The drug didn't cause dreams. It granted access to parallel versions of my life, alternate paths of existence. In one reality, I was a programmer in a medical trial. In another, a fugitive killer. In a third, a mental patient imagining this entire story. Dr. Grigoriev existed, but in another reality. Anna was real, but in a different layer. I had killed people, but in a parallel world where I was a criminal. These realities intersected, influencing each other, and the drug let me slip between them uncontrollably. But the worst realization was yet to come. The more I moved between realities, the more they blended. The killer from one world seeped into others, bringing his cruelty and madness. Memories of crimes bled into my peaceful reality, poisoning it. All versions of my life were becoming equally dark and dangerous. I understood the process was irreversible. The boundaries between worlds had collapsed, and I now existed in all realities at once. In one, I was an ordinary man taking strange pills. In another, a murderer hunting victims. In a third, a lunatic imagining it all. And in every reality, I was equally real and equally dangerous. The pill's effect faded, and the realities began to separate again. But now I knew the truth, and it was unbearable. I wasn't just a witness to horrific crimes. I was their perpetrator in one version of my life, and that version was slowly consuming the others. Over the next few days, I watched my personality unravel. In the morning, I was a programmer. By afternoon, a potential killer. By evening, a mental patient. Memories blended, emotions tangled, and I no longer knew who I was. Worst of all, my dark side grew stronger. Violent thoughts, once horrifying, now felt natural. I began planning real crimes, choosing victims, studying their routines. The killer from the parallel reality had taken over my mind. I knew I had to stop before I hurt real people. But how do you halt a process beyond control? How do you cage a monster growing stronger inside you? One evening, I sat staring at the carved handle knife, now undeniably real. I felt its weight, its sharp blade, the comfortable grip. My mind buzzed with plans for future murders, faces of victims, scenarios of their deaths. But a faint voice of reason, the last shred of my sane self, broke through. I realized I was moments from leaving the apartment and killing the first person I saw. And no one could stop me. With immense effort, I forced myself to the kitchen. I opened all the gas stove burners without lighting them. Gas filled the apartment as I sat calmly at the table, the knife before me. I had a choice. Kill myself with the knife, or let the gas explosion take not just me, but my neighbors. I chose the knife. The blade sliced easily into my wrist, severing an artery. Blood flowed warmly, staining the table and floor. The pain was sharp but bearable, and most importantly, it was real. The first sensation in weeks I didn't doubt. As my consciousness faded, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. Maybe it was all a hallucination, and I was dying for nothing. Or maybe I was truly dangerous, and my death would save lives. In my final moments, I saw all my realities at once. In one, I died in my apartment from blood loss. In another, police found me over a victim's body. In a third, doctors tried to revive me after a breakdown in a psychiatric ward. But in every reality, the outcome was the same. End. An end to the suffering, the torment, the nightmare that had consumed my life. I closed my eyes and let the darkness envelop me, carrying me away from all worlds where I'd caused so much pain. My last thought was regret for never learning who gave me those first pills or why. Was it a real experiment, my broken mind's delusion, or something stranger and more sinister? The answer remained in one of those realities I'd never reach again. Gas filled the apartment, mingling with the smell of blood. In neighboring apartments, people ate dinner, watched TV, put their kids to bed, unaware of the tragedy unfolding nearby. Their lives continued in the one true reality, the one I could never find in the endless maze of my fractured mind. The next morning, neighbors smelled gas and called emergency services. They found my body in a pool of blood at the kitchen table, the knife in my hand, a strange smile on my lips. Beside me was the leather-bound journal, filled with accounts of horrific dreams, and a bag of unmarked white tablets. The police classified it as suicide due to mental illness. No one investigated the cause of my breakdown, the origin of the pills, or the non-existent Dr. Grigoriev. The case was closed in a week, my body cremated without ceremony, but the story didn't end there. A month later, a small ad appeared in a local paper. A medical center sought volunteers to test a new insomnia drug. The pay was generous, the requirements minimal. The drug promised not only deep sleep but vivid, unforgettable dreams. Somewhere in the city, another desperate person decided a medical trial could solve their financial woes and improve their sleep. They contacted Dr. Grigoriev, underwent a medical exam, and received their first batch of blue pills called Onirin. The cycle of nightmares began anew, in another reality, with another victim. And it will continue until someone finds a way to stop this experiment, one that exists simultaneously in every world and in none of them.